look at what we have here, it tells us that the merge request pipeline actually passed. So it didn't fail. So that means one, hurdle has been crossed. But if you look at it here, it says merge is blocked because one checked failed. And the failure here is because one approval is required. So if there's no approval, of course, this is not going to be merged, right? Because if you look at it here, the person who made the commit and raised the merge request does not have the power to merge, all right, these changes. Okay, the only thing that the developer can do is to close the merge request. But of course, the admin can actually come right here. And of course, it too will see it here that, yes, this thing has, passed, right? And it's only requiring approval. And of course, you can also come right here to click on review because, I was assigned as a reviewer. So you can actually come right here, go to the commit. You can click on the commit and see what the commit is about. Click on changes as well. And so from the changes tab, you can actually see, okay, what was added, what was removed. If something was removed or anything, you can actually see all of that from here. And you can decide to, click on review and basically put in your comment, right? So you can submit your review. You can click on approve as well. Submit feedback and approve these changes. So you can submit your feedback and approve them also immediately. But let's go back to the overview. And right here, I'm going to click on approve, right? And the moment I click on approve, if you notice something, you will see that here it says ready to match, all right, ready to match. Okay. And if I go back to the developers page, you will also see it says ready to match by members who can write to the target branch. I'm going to go right here and I'm going to, of course, click on match. And as soon as this is matched, you will see here that we should have another pipeline that will be triggered because the job that we created, the cache job that we actually did create, all right, will run on merge request and on main because we didn't specify any kind of stop right here, right, as to when this job should run. So which means this job is going to run whether it's a merge request or whether it's on main. It's going to run, all the same. So that's fine anyways. So if we come right here, we can actually go back to we can go to build. Let's take a look at the pipeline. Let's see what's going on there. So you can see that we have another job that is running. So it says merge branch feature, blah, blah, blah. And now this one is running on the main branch. Can you see that? So this one ran on what? On the merge request. And it was by this person. But now this one is running, all right, and that was triggered by this person. So this is the person who approved and the person that who merged. Okay. And the importance of this is that, if something goes wrong, okay, this person raised the merge request, this person approved, and this person is running pipeline now in production. Okay. So because now whatever changes that this person has made has been merged into the main branch. All right. And then you have another pipeline, all right, that is running. So that's something that I believe it's very important. And even this guy will also see the pipeline on his own side as well. That okay, the pipeline is being merged, and of course, another pipeline is running. And if you look at what you have here, the source branch has been deleted as well. So that source branch is no longer there. So that means if we go to the repository, all right, and try to look at the branches we have, we can see that we can't find a feature branch right here. So that way you have only the branches that you need, that's what to be here, right? So that will prevent what I mentioned earlier about orphaned branches, right? Branches that are no longer serving any purpose, but they are just there, right? And then you open some repositories, you find 30, 40, 50 branches with different names, and you can't even tell, okay, what's this one doing? What's that one doing? So when you merge and you delete like that, it only keeps the branch, right, that is functional, that is connected to your actual environment, whether you're dev, your prod, your staging, and all of those kinds of environment, okay? So now the merge is ongoing, right? The new pipeline is running. So at this stage now, we can begin to add, test, git leaks, and all those kind of things to it. But before we do all of that, there's one thing that I would want to call our attention to. Now, when you talk about DevSecOps, right, the important thing here is shifting security to the left, which means at every stage, in the software development lifecycle, or maybe your infrastructure deployment with Terraform and all those things, you want security to be a part of everything, every step of the way. All right. And one of the things that you can do is that before your developers make a push, whether to their feature branch, whether to before they make any approach at all, right, you want to be able to check what they are committing and everything. Now, there's a concept that is called the pre-commit hook, right, whereby if there's any kind of secret in the code and everything, when the developers does, a git commit, right, that pre-commit hook can intercept that commit and reject it, from being pushed into the repository if it contains some kind of, secrets and all those kind of stuff. But the problem, there are two things, all right, with that. The first one is you have to configure the pre-commit hook on the laptop, right? For example, if I do ls, um, if I do ls.git, all right, now I would see that I have a folder here called hooks. And inside of that folder, you have different, pre-commit, pre-push, and different things there. So let's do another ls, ls-la. Now here, if you look at what you have here, you have quite a number of things, right? You have pre-commit sample, you have pre-merge commit sample and everything. So the challenge with this is something you have to do on each developer's laptop. So if you have 100 developers, 1,000 developers, right? How do you manage this? Okay. So that's the problem. That's the number one problem. Now, the number two challenge you might have also is that, the problem of false positive. How do you design your system in a way that, there's to reduce noise basically, because there are certain things that maybe git leaks and all those things will detect a secret, because don't forget, these secret detection softwares, they use, patterns, right? Regex pattern and some other kind of pattern to determine if something is a secret, if something is an API key that shouldn't be committed and all this kind of stuff. But how do you structure it in such a way that, it doesn't just overwhelm you with noise? And then you look through the report and you discover that these things are not secrets. These are just basically, maybe Terraform, log file, things that are needed as part of the code, right? That are actually not harmful, that actually cannot, cause any kind of damage or exploitation of vulnerability and all those kind of things. So how do you prevent against false positives and things like that? So two things that I mentioned, you can configure a pre-commit hook right here to prevent your developers from, committing secret. But then, like I said, if you have 10, 100,000 developers, how do you manage this individually, right? And of course, the issue of false positive. And that is what will lead us to the next thing that I want us to look at. Now, since we have activated, all right, the GitLab Ultimate Trial. Now, GitLab has what we call a secret detection that we can actually use. So if you come here to, I think under security, you come to security configuration, right? You have what you call secret detection. So the purpose of the secret detection is basically to help you to detect secret. And fun fact, it actually also leverages, I think, Git leaks behind the scene as well. All right. And so, but then there's one thing that you must understand about the secret detection, because one thing that GitLab has done also is that they've optimized, all right, these secret push protection. They've optimized it in such a way, that it reduces false positive as much as possible. We can actually click on this and, click on the learn more, all right? So let's look at what this is. Now, if you want to use this, of course, you have to be an ultimate user. So like I said, luckily for us, we're using the trial version. And so we can actually experiment with this and learn one or two things about it. So let me go back so that I open this in a new tab. All right. So now, if you go down here, it gives you information about how this can be used. So security configuration profiles, centralized, blah, blah, blah. And of course, if you scroll down here, it tells you the coverage and everything that you need to know. Now, there's what you call the secret detection profile. So there's push protection. Scans all Git push events and blocks pushes where secrets are detected, preventing secret from ever entering your code base. So this push protection is one thing that we're going to be looking at. All right. But like I said, GitLab already has a list, all right, of secrets that they deem, that should not be committed into your repository. So if anything is not on that list, it's basically just going to ignore it and see it as noise. So it's not going to alert you or tell you, oh, no, it's not going to do that, right? Because that means, for example, if I just, type something, scribble something, and then put it there and then try to push it, doesn't mean it should look at it and say, oh, this is a secret. Oh, we're not allowing this. No. Secret push protection can scan files domain for specific pattern. Each pattern matches a specific type of secret. Now, look at what it says. To confirm which secrets are detected by secret protection, see this. So you can see here, it says only high confidence patterns were chosen for secret push protection to minimize the delay when pushing your commit and minimize the number of what? Of false alerts. So it's been optimized, all right, to minimize false alert and to minimize delay. Okay, so that if it looks at it and says, oh, this one does not match this particular pattern, then it just moves on. So let's click on this detected secret and see, because I'm showing you this to help you understand. Look at this now. These are detected secrets. So if anything in your code base, if it matches whatever it is that is here, then GitLab is going to flag it and say, hey, this is a secret that should not be pushed into the repository, and it's going to flag that. So if you scroll down, it says this table lists the secret detected by pipeline secret detection, client-side secret detection, and secret push protection. Now look at what you have here. So these are like name of organizations, platforms, tools, and all those kind of things. And these are the three, secret detection that GitLab offers. So there's the pipeline secret detection, which you can incorporate into your pipeline. And that one uses Git leaks behind the scene. And that also has been optimized, okay, to reduce delays and also to reduce, false alert, which is false positive as much as possible. So now this one, this one can be used within your pipeline secret detection. So which means as part of your pipeline configuration, all right, if you have this key inside of your code base, the pipeline can detect it and everything. But sometimes that can be late because you've committed it to the repository already. What if somebody asks you repo and the person lays hand, on that particular key, then that might not. So that's where the secret push protection actually comes in. So that before it even gets to the remote origin, let's block it. And so if you look at this one also, the secret protection also covers this guy as well. Right? Adobe client, alt web and everything, pipeline secret detection can catch that, but secret push protection will not catch that. And if you scroll down also, there are a list of things, all right, that, for example, Anthropic API key, your pipeline secret detection can catch that, your secret push protection can also catch that. So even before you even push it at all, it tells you this one cannot, go, and all those things. And of course, if you look at it also, the list is long. You can go through the list to understand, what qualifies, to be categorized as a detected secret when you're using GitLab Secret Push protection. And I'm going to show you how, how it works. All right. So here also you can see that the AWS access key ID falls under secret push protection, but secret access key, right, can be detected in the pipeline, but secret push protection will basically ignore that, which means as far as they are concerned, is the access key ID that, matters to them, for the secret push protection. You can argue that, but that's the way they look at it. Session token, both covers, all of that. So the reason I'm showing you this is that, when you enable it, you don't just think, oh, it's going to catch everything. No, it has been optimized. And that's why if you read what they mention here when we're going through it, they let us know that this thing has been what? Optimized. And these are the pattern that it matches. So anything that does not fall into that pattern, sorry, is not covered, all right, in this. Okay, so I believe that I have given you an important information as well. So in the next video, we are going to go ahead, all right, and enable the secret detection, right? We're going to go ahead and enable it, and we're going to test it and see, all right, how it works. So we try to generate maybe an AWS access key ID and then put it into the code and try to push it. And then let's see how GitLab will react, all right, to that.